My girlfriend told me she was meeting up with a friend. The problem is that friend was with me at the exact same time. We were choosing an engagement ring. I'm 28 years old. My girlfriend is 26. We've been together for 3 years, and for a while now I've been seriously planning to propose. The issue is that I am absolutely terrible when it comes to jewelry. Like, genuinely clueless. I'm the kind of guy who doesn't see anything wrong with rings that have little hearts on them. Seriously, why does everyone hate those so much? Because of that, whenever I want to buy her jewelry, I usually ask for help from one of our mutual friends. One of her friends and I get along really well. We've all known each other for years. We hang out together. There's nothing weird about it. So asking for advice on jewelry has always been normal for me. When it came time to choose an engagement ring, I reached out to her best friend. Let's call her Justina. Justina and I are fairly close, and honestly, she knows my girlfriend better than anyone else, sometimes even better than I do. She knows her taste, her style, what she likes, what she hates. So when my girlfriend went out of town to visit her sister and nephew, I invited Justina over to my place to help me pick out a ring. We went through several catalogs together, looking at different styles and options, but pretty quickly we realized that this approach was going nowhere. Everything looked the same, and neither of us felt confident about any choice. Eventually, we agreed that the only real solution was to go to an actual jewelry store and see things in person. The problem was that I didn't know when my girlfriend would be coming back home. I didn't want to risk her walking in on us or getting suspicious. So Justina and I came up with a simple but clever way to figure out how much time we had. I texted my girlfriend and asked her when she'd be home, saying that I was planning to order food and wanted to know when to schedule the delivery. She replied that she'd be back in a couple of hours because she was supposedly meeting up with Justina to go shopping. I just stared at my phone. Because Justina was literally sitting in my living room at that exact moment, I showed her the message, and she looked just as shocked as I felt. We both kind of froze for a second, trying to process what we were reading. Normally, this kind of thing wouldn't have been that strange. My girlfriend is very spontaneous. She'll randomly decide to meet friends, go shopping, grab lunch, all without much planning. That's just how she is. In any other situation, I would have believed that text without even questioning it. But this time, it was obviously a lie. When my girlfriend eventually came home, she acted completely normal. No weird behavior, no nervousness, nothing out of the ordinary. I tried to act normal too, but inside I was struggling. We had dinner together, then we sat on the couch and cuddled like we usually do. At some point, she could tell that something was off with me. She asked if everything was okay. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't say, "It hurts to look at you right now. We've never had trust issues before. Not once. We've always been open with each other, always shared everything." That's why this hit me so hard. This lie was eating me alive. I desperately wanted to confront her and ask why she lied. But if I told her I knew she was lying, I'd have to explain how I knew. And explaining that would mean revealing that I was ring shopping, and I really didn't want to ruin the surprise. I kept telling myself to let it go, to forget about it. But I couldn't. It just kept looping in my head over and over again. I didn't know what to do. So I came here to ask for advice. Please help me. Sorry, everyone. Today has been absolute chaos. My parents are in the middle of moving, and I've been helping them all day. On top of that, I've never received this many comments in my life. It's honestly overwhelming. I'm planning to talk to her tonight. I'll post an update tomorrow. Before that, though, I want to ask you something. Before I read any more comments, I'd like to know what you would do in my situation, ignoring the fact that I've already decided to talk to her. Personally, knowing myself, I'd probably confront her immediately and accuse her of lying. Yeah, I'd have to admit that I was shopping for a ring, but honestly, at that point, it feels like there's some kind of secret drama going on behind my back. It was a clear lie. Plain and simple. Maybe she had a good reason. Maybe there was some explanation that would make sense. But right now, I can't see one. So yeah, let me know what you think. What would you do in my place? Hey everyone. I honestly don't even know where to start. My last post got way more attention than I ever expected. It was kind of overwhelming, not going to lie. I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who left supportive comments and kind messages. I received a lot of genuinely good advice that helped me calm down and think clearly. I also got a ton of really warm and encouraging messages, which meant more to me than you probably realize. That said, I also saw a darker side of this community. There were so many comments saying things like, "She's cheating on you," or "It's over," or "Don't even talk to her. Just leave." Advice like that can destroy relationships that don't need to end, relationships that just need communication and honesty. So here's the update. I decided to talk to my girlfriend directly. I considered using some of the excuses people suggested in the comments, but the more I thought about them, the less sense they made. Saying that I randomly ran into Justina somewhere didn't work, because I had already told my girlfriend that I was staying home to help with things around the house. That was the reason I didn't go with her to visit her sister in the first place. Saying that Justina was helping me choose jewelry didn't really make sense either. She wouldn't travel all the way across the city just to help me pick out a random gift. If I were buying something small, I would have just asked her and the other friends to send pictures in a group chat. That's how we usually handle things like that. The more I went over it in my head, the more I realized that none of the excuses sounded believable. So, I decided to be honest. I told her that we both know we've been thinking a lot about marriage lately, and that she probably suspects a proposal isn't too far away. I told her that I asked Justina to help me find the perfect engagement ring, and I admitted that it just happened to be on the same day she told me she was meeting up with her. Then I asked her directly what was really going on. At first, she started smiling awkwardly and immediately bombarded me with questions about the proposal and the ring. But eventually, we came back to the real issue. Where was she actually that day? She finally told me the truth. No, she wasn't cheating. No, she wasn't secretly picking out a ring for me, despite how many people assumed that in the comments. Here's what actually happened. I've loved snakes since I was a kid. I grew up around them, and I've always wanted one. But I never got one because my girlfriend has always been nervous about the idea of living with a snake, and I respected that completely. Also, owning a snake isn't like owning a cat or a dog. It's complicated. There's a lot to learn and prepare for. So you can imagine my reaction when she pulled out her phone and showed me photos of the cutest Kenyan sand boa I have ever seen in my life. She had been planning a surprise for me. She was going to gift me the snake. We're picking it up next week. Honestly, never saw it coming. And now I feel a little guilty for almost ruining the surprise. But at the same time, I can't stop smiling. Life is good. Sorry if this wasn't the dramatic ending some of you were expecting. Thanks for reading. Next story. The guy had a crush on. Overheard a dirty conversation my friend and I were having about him. And I honestly don't think I'll ever fully recover from the embarrassment. This happened yesterday, and I still feel like I want the ground to swallow me whole. For context, I'm 19 years old, and he's 21. It all started when the teaching assistant for one of my classes got sick, and a replacement was brought in to cover the lecture. The guy who showed up looked a little awkward at first, kind of stiff, not very confident, but oh my god, he was adorable. Later on, I did what any normal person would do and lightly stalked him online. I found his blog pretty quickly. He's a total nerd, very smart, very academic, but also surprisingly attractive. And I have a huge weakness for guys like that. A few days later, I was sitting in the library when he sat down next to me. After a few minutes of awkward silence, I worked up the courage to talk to him. We ended up chatting for hours. Like, actual hours. Needless to say, I got absolutely nothing done that day. For a bit more context, I also work part-time in a research laboratory at my university. Last week, my main supervisor was still on vacation, but my mentor had full access to the lab, which meant I could come in and run experiments as usual. One of my close friends works in the same lab, so we were hanging out together in an almost completely empty building. Around 4 p.m., we decided to step out into the hallway to grab a snack and just take a short break. One of the doors to a neighboring lab was slightly open, but we didn't pay any attention to it. The entire floor was basically deserted anyway. Most people were still on break after the holidays. We started chatting about the guy my friend was seeing, and then, out of nowhere, she asked me if anything new had happened between me and that awkward but cute guy who had replaced the teaching assistant. I told her about the library, about how we talked for hours, and she immediately went into analysis mode. She started asking about his body language, his facial expressions, how close he sat next to me. We started joking around, saying things like, "Did he look at your lips? Or did he hold eye contact for more than 5 or 6 seconds?" Because obviously, according to our completely scientific method, if the answer was yes, then he definitely wanted to hook up with me. We were laughing like idiots, and then, as usual, I completely lost my filter and said something extremely stupid. I blurted out that I'd even let him have sex with me if he wanted to. Disclaimer, I was joking. Very much joking. Right after that, I heard footsteps. My friend and I both turned our heads at the exact same time, and there he was, standing in the doorway of the lab next to us. The guy. The one I liked. He looked at us with this expression that was a mix of shock and disbelief, barely holding it together. Then he said something like, "Hey, maybe you should keep it down." After that, he winked at me, turned around, walked back into the lab, and left the door wide open. I just stood there, completely frozen. I slowly turned to my friend, my face burning, and she silently mouthed, "Holy SHT. That was him." Asterisk, I didn't even think. I just took off running down the hallway, bolted down the stairs, burst out of the building, and collapsed onto a bench outside. My friend ran after me, laughing so hard she could barely breathe, while I was mentally planning how to fake my own death. Eventually, once she stopped laughing, she tried to comfort me. Later, she Googled the lab that was literally just a few doors down from ours. Sure enough, he was listed there as part of the research team. There was no mention of it anywhere on his social media, not LinkedIn, not Facebook, nothing. I had never seen him in those hallways before. Not once. Do I think he heard everything I said? Yes. Does it bother me that he didn't really react beyond that wink? Absolutely. Do I want to crawl into a hole and stay there forever? 100%. Update. 2 months passed. After that incident, I avoided the lab entirely until winter break was over. I kept telling myself that once everyone came back, I'd just blend into the crowd and probably never see him again. That did not happen. On the very first day back, I was standing in the break room making myself a piece of toast when he walked in. I immediately panicked. I thought, okay, this conversation is inevitable. I should probably apologize for that comment. Instead, I turned my back to him and started aggressively spreading peanut butter on my toast, as if that would somehow make me invisible. Spoiler, it did not. He walked right up to me, smiled, and said, "Hey, how were your holidays?" I awkwardly replied that they were fine, that I mostly stayed on campus and worked in the lab. He said he did pretty much the same thing, except he visited his family for a few days. Thankfully, he didn't bring up that incident at all. Then he asked, Is that all you're eating for lunch? I said something like, ah yeah. I was in a rush and forgot to bring food. He told me he was about to grab something to eat at a cafe nearby and asked if I wanted to join him. My first thought was, wow, what an asshole. But I forced myself not to overthink it and assumed he was just being polite. So I said yes. And honestly, it was a really great lunch. On the way back, he couldn't resist teasing me. He smiled and said, so tell me, during lunch today, how many seconds do you think I was looking at you? I just stared at him, completely stunned. He laughed and added, probably more than 6 seconds straight. Right. Guess that means I'm definitely into you. Yes, that was a direct reference to the conversation he overheard that day in the hallway. Somehow, I managed to laugh and fire back a joke of my own. Tomorrow marks 1 month since we started dating. No, we haven't done that. A couple of weeks in, he told me that while he appreciated my comment, it's just not something he's into. Looks like my backdoor virginity is safe. But in the end, I walked away from this whole nightmare with the sweetest, smartest, kindest guy I could have hoped for. I went on a date with a guy I really liked and he brought his best friend with him. I wish I was joking. I'm 23 years old, and I matched with this guy on a dating app a few weeks ago. Let's call him Mark. From the very first conversation, we clicked instantly. Same sense of humor, same interests, same weird late-night energy. We talked every single day, sometimes until 3 or 4 in the morning. After about 2 weeks of non-stop texting, he finally asked me out. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. Nothing fancy, just coffee, pastries, and conversation. I spent way too long getting ready, changed outfits at least 3 times, and showed up 10 minutes early because I was nervous. I saw him walk in and my heart genuinely skipped a beat. He looked exactly like his pictures. Tall, cute, slightly awkward in an endearing way. And then I noticed someone walking in right behind him. Another guy. At first, I thought they just arrived together and that the other guy would keep walking. But no, they both came straight to my table. Mark smiled and said, "Hey, this is my best friend Josh." I waited for the punchline. It never came. Josh sat down with us. Mark acted like this was the most normal thing in the world. Like bringing your best friend to a first date was standard procedure that everyone else was somehow aware of except me. Josh immediately started talking about everything. His job, his hobbies, his opinions, his favorite movies. He completely dominated the conversation while Mark just nodded along and left. I barely got a word in. 13:02 at first, I tried to be polite. I told myself maybe Josh was just walking Mark to the cafe and would leave soon. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then 45. He wasn't leaving. At some point, Mark excused himself to go to the bathroom, and Josh leaned in and said, "So, what do you think of him?" I stared at him, completely confused. I didn't even know how to respond. I said something vague like, "Yeah, he seems nice." Josh smiled and said, "Good, because I have to approve." I wish I was exaggerating. When Mark came back, nothing changed. Josh stayed. The 3 of us ordered more drinks, more food. It started to feel less like a date and more like an awkward group hangout where I was the odd one out. Eventually, Mark suggested we all go for a walk. So we did. The entire walk, Josh stayed right between us. Every time Mark tried to talk to me, Josh somehow redirected the conversation back to himself. If Mark laughed at something I said, Josh immediately made a louder joke. If Mark asked me a question, Josh answered it first. It was honestly impressive in a horrifying way. After almost 2 hours of this, I finally gave up. I said I had an early morning and needed to head home. Mark looked genuinely disappointed. Josh looked offended. That night, Mark texted me saying he had a great time and asked when we could see each other again. I didn't know how to respond. I waited until the next day and finally asked him, as gently as I could, why he brought his friend on our date. There was a long pause. Then he replied, Josh always comes with me on first dates. Apparently, Josh has been his best friend since childhood. They do everything together. Vacations, hobbies, weekends, social events. Mark explained that Josh is very protective of him and wants to make sure he doesn't get hurt. I asked him if Josh would also come on the second date. Mark replied, well, yeah, probably. I didn't even know what to say. Update. A few days later, I decided to give him one more chance, mostly because I liked Mark, and partly because I was morbidly curious to see how bad it could get. We planned dinner at a restaurant. Josh was already there when I arrived. This time, I didn't even act surprised. Halfway through dinner, Mark got up to go to the restroom. The moment he was gone, Josh leaned across the table and said, I don't think you're right for him. I asked why. He said, you seem like the kind of person who would put him second. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I told him that if I ever dated Mark, I'd expect to be alone with him sometimes. Josh stared at me and said, that's not how this works. That was it. When Mark came back, I told him calmly that this wasn't going to work for me. I explained that I liked him, but I wasn't interested in dating both him and his best friend at the same time. Mark looked devastated. Josh looked furious. I paid for my meal, stood up, and walked out. Final update. 2 weeks later, Mark texted me apologizing. He said he didn't realize how unhealthy his dynamic with Josh was until multiple people pointed it out to him. He told me they had a serious conversation and agreed to set boundaries. He asked if I'd consider giving him another chance. I said no, because even if Josh stayed home next time, I'd always feel like I was being evaluated. And honestly, I deserve a date, not a committee meeting. I found out my boyfriend had been lying to me for months because of something incredibly small. I'm 25 years old, and until recently, I thought my relationship was solid. Not perfect, but stable. The kind of relationship where you argue occasionally, talk things through, and move on. We'd been together for almost 2 years. We lived together. We shared bills, groceries, routines. From the outside, everything looked fine. That's probably why this hurt as much as it did. It started with something stupid. A charger. My phone charger kept going missing. Not once, not twice, constantly. I'd leave it on my nightstand, go to work, come back, and it would be gone. I'd find it later in the living room, or plugged in near the couch, or sometimes not find it at all. At first, I assumed it was just normal shared space chaos. But then I noticed something else. Whenever I asked him if he'd seen my charger, he'd hesitate. Not for long, just a fraction of a second. A pause so small you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. And he always said the same thing, no idea. Maybe you moved it. That pause started bothering me. One evening, I got home earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I walked into the bedroom and immediately noticed that my charger was plugged into his side of the bed. That wasn't unusual by itself. What was unusual was that his phone wasn't there. I followed the cable. It disappeared under the bed. I crouched down and reached underneath. What I pulled out made my stomach drop. It was a second phone, not a work phone, not an old phone, a fully charged, newer model phone, with notifications lighting up the screen. I just sat there for a moment, holding it, feeling completely numb. I didn't unlock it. I didn't scroll. I didn't dig. I waited. When he got home, I placed the phone on the table between us and asked him to explain. He went pale. At first, he tried to laugh it off. Said it was nothing. Said he was just holding it for a friend. I didn't say a word. Eventually, the truth came out. He had been talking to someone online. Not just casually chatting, emotionally involved. Daily conversations. Late night calls. Inside jokes. Future plans that didn't include me. He said he never met her in person, that it wasn't really cheating. I didn't argue. What hurt the most wasn't the other person, it was the lying. The tiny, repeated lies. The way he looked me in the eyes and made me doubt my own memory over something as small as a charger. That's when I realized, if someone can lie convincingly about something that insignificant, they can lie about anything. Final update. 1945. I moved out a week later. He tried to apologize. He said he panicked. He said he didn't know how to stop. He said he never meant to hurt me. Maybe that's true. But I've learned something important from all of this. Trust doesn't usually break in one dramatic moment. It erodes quietly, charger by charger. Asterisk. If any of these stories made you uncomfortable, angry, or quietly say, yeah, that's messed up, then trust me, you're not alone. Stories like these happen every single day. And the scariest part, most of them start with something small. A lie, a pause, a detail people usually ignore. So if you want more real stories like this, stories that slowly pull you in and stay with you long after the video ends, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Drop a like if at least one story hit closer to home than you expected. And let me know in the comments which story disturbed you the most, because the next one might be even worse. See you in the next video.